Kim, the honor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. So for those of us who have been with Keller Williams for any length of time, today's guest needs no introduction. For those of us here today who are newer to the KW family or who are guests, here's a little background on Mo Anderson, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, really. She joined Keller Williams in 1995 as president and CEO. At that time, KW had 35 market centers or brokerage offices. Within 10 years, she led the company through incredible growth and expanded the number of market centers to over 530. Most notable, however, is not just what she did, but how she did it. With integrity, intentionality, and compassion, Mo spearheaded an agent-centric, people-centric culture that inspired Stanford University's Graduate School of Business to conduct a case study on it. Her reputation and success have earned her opportunities to speak at Yale and at the Real Estate Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C., among other things. She has written an autobiography aptly titled A Joy-Filled Life. At 80 years young, she currently serves as vice chairman of the board for Keller Williams. So without further ado, it is my joy to welcome Mo Anderson.
Oh, Kimberly, thank you, honey. I'm going to hire you for my PR person.
I gladly do it, Mo.
Unfortunately, I'm not 80 anymore. I'm
there you go. So you graduated.
I graduated to 83.
Awesome.
Oh, my word. Y'all think, what's that old lady doing on the line?
Oh, we're so happy to have you, and the more years, the more wisdom and experience, right?
That's exactly right. That is so true. Oh, your intro was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to tell Kelly to have you record that and we'll use it.
Hey, happy to oblige, happy to be of service. How are you today?
Listen, I am so good. I don't know if you all know, but I went to the Mayo Clinic. Let's see, when did I go? It was in June, and I got me a new aortic heart valve. So I am really good.
You're good.
I have all my usual energy. I'm a high energy person, and I got it on a Monday, came home on a Tuesday, started making my calls on Wednesday, and Thursday I had a little teeny tiny party with some of my friends to celebrate my new heart valve.
Oh, that is so wonderful.
They didn't have to cut me open. They stuck it up the groin the groin vein, and stuck it into place, and man, I'm good to go for another 20 years.
Oh, that's fabulous. It's amazing what medical technology can do these days. So
it is.
Wonderful. Well, I feel confident, speaking on behalf of myself and everyone here, that it is an honor and a privilege to have you with us today. And please accept our sincere thank you for spending some of your valuable time with us.
Well, I'm honored that you would ask me.
And this is amazing. This is really, really amazing. I don't know how Nathan managed this. He has arranged some fantastic guests for our benefit. And yet one thing I can say is this: unless Gary Keller himself is next, anyone else is going to be like, meh. So there's no point in trying to top this.
The five-year-old lady.
Yeah. So I'm sure like me, everybody else here is anxious to glean insights from your wisdom and experience that we'll use to help us learn and grow. So my first question and my first thought, I've read your book, A Joy-Filled Life, and in it, you share your life story from childhood through the ups and downs of your career. And you were hardly born with a silver spoon in your mouth, right?
Oh, no.
Right.
No.
In your book, you describe your family as materially poor and spiritually rich. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we were financially very, very poor. And the struggle was mighty and it was great. My parents came out of the Great Depression. Now, remember, I'm 83 years old. So we go back a long ways. And I want you to know that their struggle was mighty, and it was very, very hard, because that was the end of the Depression era. When I was born, the Depression was still in existence. The Dust Bowl was still very much alive in our area, and I grew up in that environment as a very young child. And life was hard, and I'm sure it wasn't as hard as it is in some countries across the big ocean, but it was very, very difficult. And now, what was your question?
Well, and so you've kind of laid out the kind of the material side, the being poor and the circumstances, but you said your family was spiritually rich.
Yes, it was spiritually rich. My parents raised us in the Christian faith, and my father and mother were diligent to live the best life they could. And so it was a life of a lot of hard work, and it was a life of having close relationships with a lot of our friends at church, and seeing meaningful relationships develop between different classes of people. My father was beloved. Even though he didn't have a dime, he was beloved in the community. And so it was quite a contrast. It seems to me the division of the different groups of people are a little more specific now, when everybody had to deal with the Dust Bowl and everybody had to deal with the environment back then. The classes weren't as distinguished as they are now. Did I say it right?
I think that makes sense.
We had wealthy people in our community, and they were as nice to us as could be, even though we were really the poorest of poor in that community.
Mm-hmm.
On our farms. My father was a tenant farmer, and we moved from area to area. And so we had richness in our life, but we had a lot of hard efforts in our living, is kind of a way to put it.
Yeah, and that kind of like leads to my next question. If you could whittle it down to a core principle or two that you can identify from your upbringing that helped you create such massive success, and not even just success for yourself, but you've also created a path for others to achieve success. So if you could take a couple of core principles that have helped you to do that and helped you to weather the storms of life and business, what would that be?
It was my father excuse me, my father telling me that I could do anything I wanted to do when I grew up. Now, my mother had a little more of a negative side to her than my father. He was the one with the positivity, and he is the one who literally just ingrained in me as a young child. You see, I was milking cows at the age of 6. I was responsible for bringing in the sheep, the cattle, at age 6. There aren't very many kids nowadays that do hard work at age 6.
I would say not.
Well, I started really young, and most of my childhood life was spent working.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't playing all the time like kids get to do now.
Right.
So a work ethic developed, a strong work ethic developed through all of that. And I learned to work, and my father was the one that constantly said to me, you can do anything you want to do when you grow up.
Now, is that something that you intentionally built your life around, your business life around? Did you think about that, or was it
Yes.
something that you saw, just noticed manifesting over time? And the reason I ask that is because, good, bad, or indifferent, the beliefs we hold, whether we're consciously aware of them or not, create the lives we lead and the results we get. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. And I suspect we can all learn something from how this played out in your life.
Well, it is really amazing because we really were in the deep poverty level. That's where we were according to American standards. We were at the bottom of the rung. I wore shoes to school that had holes in the bottom of them. And I will never forget the day when my father stopped by the Carnegie Library in Enid, Oklahoma. We lived about 21 miles out on a farm from Enid, Oklahoma, and he stopped at that library. And this was a moment in my life that changed everything. I can't remember for sure how old I was, but 10 or 12 or in that range. And we were in our pitiful old car that would only run part of the time. And I thought he was stopping so we could check out some books, because my parents, even though they were in deep poverty, really knew the value of education. And so we checked out books. But that day, he didn't take me in the library. He took my hand, he led me up the steps of that beautiful Carnegie Library. They were all over the country, those Carnegie libraries. And he said, I want to tell you the story about Andrew Carnegie. And he tells me how poor he was as a child. When he grew up, we all know he was filthy rich. And before he died, he wanted to get his money distributed out. He gave what he needed to his family and his children and grandchildren. And the rest of the money he used to build these libraries all over the United States of America. And he told me that beautiful story. And it touched me, and it moved my heart to think that a man would take his wealth and make it a kid like me, who was poor as could be, able to check out a book.
Yeah.
And my dad told me that day, he said, when you grow up, you can do anything you want to do. The opportunity is yours. But you see, he wouldn't allow us to take any kind of welfare, and he made us work. I'm telling you, work. Gary Keller could not believe my work ethic. When I came to Keller Williams, he was pooped out by 5 o'clock. Me, I worked till 2 o'clock in the morning and came back at 6 in the morning, had 4 hours of sleep. Gary could no more do that because his stamina just isn't there.
Right.
And God just gave me a whole bunch of stamina so I could do that.
Well, maybe he needs a heart valve.
Maybe so. I tell you, I'm sure feeling good with mine.
Oh, fantastic. Well, John Maxwell says that we learn the most significant life lessons in the valleys, not on the mountaintops. In a joy-filled life, you shared some of your valleys, and there were some serious valleys, like the bottom fell out. So could you share with us, one or two of the difficult or perhaps downright scary circumstances that you faced and the lessons that you took from them?
Well, I have a whole lot of those, but I'll only give you one or two. The downturn of the economy in the 80s was really, really tough. The late 80s. Now, remember, Gary Keller did not call me until I think it was 1991 is when he called me. He only had 7 offices when he heard about me and called me. But my husband and I had worked so hard, and we built a really great real estate company that we had actually sold to Merrill Lynch. And I want you to know that it was the greatest thing ever. We sold the company for more money than I ever dreamed existed. And then the recession hit in the late 80s and early 1990s, in the late 80s and early 90s. And this is when Gary Keller calls me. When he calls me, we are back to being dirt poor again because we lost all of our money in the downturn of the economy. And so when Gary actually met me, I was poor again. For a while, we were financially very stable and doing well. We had sold our company for a whole lot of money. I'm talking, in the millions. And then the recession hit, and we lost all of that money because a lot of our partners and that we had in investments went under, and we were the only one left with money because we'd sold our real estate company. And so the money just went so fast, it just made your head spin. So we were broke again. And that downturn was one of the most difficult things I've ever been through. And then I would say the other thing that happened to us that was just horrible was our son, our oldest child. We have 2 children, and our son went off to college. And during that time, he began to drink with the guys, and he became an alcoholic. And I'm telling you, that was hell to go through. Mm-hmm. If you have a child that is an alcoholic, it is horrible. And I didn't put that in my book because Rick is still alive and he's doing really well. He got help, but you all have no idea what we went through in that situation. And he's now been sober for around 20 years.
That's amazing. That's
and
great.
I am 83, and he is 60. So see, he's getting up there. Mm-hmm. And I just can't tell you how difficult that was. So I feel real good about him now, but he really destroyed his health in being an alcoholic for the length of time that he was. And I didn't want to write about it in our book because I was afraid it would embarrass him. Mm-hmm. But I will, I'll share it with you. It was really a hard time. Yeah. And if any of you are experiencing that with alcoholic children, call me. I can certainly share with you what we did and what we went through and how difficult it was, and you can cry on my shoulder.
So what or whom do you lean into in those tough times?
Well, I am a committed, dedicated Christian, and I went through a period where I was an agnostic, and a lot of the questions, that I struggled with were answered, and I came back to my faith. And I want you to know that who I go to in times of great difficulty, which I've had a lot in my life, people look at me, they see that I'm really happy because I've learned how you rise above adversity and heartache. I know how to do that. And I just cherish and relish every minute I live. But you go through a lot of bad stuff to get there. You deal with it. And so
Oh, that
did I
relates
answer
back
your
to
question?
yeah, that's what John Maxwell said. Like, we learn our best, the greatest lessons in those valleys, for sure.
It's really the only time you really learn. And I worry so much about the modern current generation because I don't know about you, but we have a tendency to want to spoil our grandchildren because we've been through so much in our own life, and that is not good for them because it's the hard stuff that you experience when you're a child and a teenager that really makes you who you are when you are an adult. And thank God I had godly parents. Oh, you just can't imagine how they struggled. But my father would tell me, when you grow up, you can do anything. See, he wasn't a drunkard. He wasn't an alcoholic. He wasn't on drugs. He made me believe that I could do things. And so even though I had holes in my shoes and very few clothes, I still believed I could do things.
Yeah, that belief carried you through, and clearly you
And
built
the
a
belief
lifetime.
carried me through a lot of rough times.
Yeah.
And I know we have spoiled our kids. Well, we didn't have money for a long time. So our kids kind of had a hard time too. We struggled. We certainly had good jobs and all of that, but I'm telling you, I've just spoiled my grandkids rotten, and I really haven't done them a service. We just had our first great grandchild.
Congratulations.
And I'm so in love with her. And, I just think of all these things I want to do to spoil her. And I told my granddaughter, I said, Andy, you're just going to have to keep me from doing those things. Because when you had a hard life growing up, you want to make it easier for the next generation when it's the hard life that makes you who you are.
Right. And it kind of, what you're talking about brings me to the next thing. I want to talk about a 4-letter word: accountability. And us real estate agents, we hear that word and we're like, it might as well be a 4-letter word. So, but really, many of us struggle with accountability. And as entrepreneurs, we seek freedom, yet without accountability and discipline, true freedom is elusive. So what has been the most effective or productive way you've incorporated meaningful accountability into your life?
Well, it was instilled in me at such a young age because in our family, well, let me back up. In a lot of families today, children get to play almost all the time when they're young. And when we were young, we had responsibilities at a very, very early age. Can you imagine your 6-year-old milking a cow every morning and milking one every night, feeding
I
the
can't imagine doing
chickens,
it now, Mo.
digging in the garden. I mean, it was work, work, work. And that's what it is when you're on a farm and your father is a tenant farmer and you're trying to eke out enough food to eat and eke out a living for shoes and school books. And so it's really very, very difficult when you're in at that poverty level. So we absolutely spoil our kids now. We really do. I can remember when I was teaching school, you know, all the mothers, oh, that was wonderful. You know, you hit the ball to first base and that was glorious and you did so good. It was just gush, 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 you know, brag, brag, brag. When my parents were saying, we want to teach you responsibility and we want to show you how what you did, you could have done at a higher level if you would have been responsible to do thus and so. So it wasn't all brag.
Right.
It was brag on certain occasions, and the rest of the time, it was challenging me to do it even better and find a better way of doing things. And I worry about, you know, my own grandkids because now I gush over them.
Well,
You
see,
know,
that's one
I
of the
do
privileges,
exactly what I shouldn't do.
but that's one of the privileges of grandparenthood.
Yeah.
So,
But I know you know, I know how old I am, so
you've earned it, Mo. I want to touch on Keller Williams more specifically. One of the things that I most appreciate about KW and try to convey to people who don't really know Keller Williams or think they do and they really don't, is that from my perspective, this company is totally about its people. And the company's mission statement is to build careers worth having, businesses worth owning, lives worth living, experiences worth giving, and legacies worth leaving. So from the abundant training available to the culture, from the top down, this company is invested in helping us be the best versions of ourselves so we can create lives of joy and significance using our businesses as a vehicle to do so. So other than the obvious financial success, what has being part of Keller Williams brought to your life?
oh man, it's brought so much. I would say that it has brought friendships that are so deep and so glorious and so wonderful. I don't have a chance to get acquainted with everybody in the company. Obviously, it would be impossible. But for example, Kay Evans, she's one of the owners of of one of our regions, and you know, my friendship with her is just so rich and so wonderful. And we've grown together in helping build Keller Williams. And I look at her as a giant. And I think that people in Atlanta are absolutely so fortunate to be able to stand on her shoulders, so to speak. And I know the trend today is to kind of, oh, you old people go away, us young people, you know, it's our turn. And that's true. But my goodness, what Kay Evans, her experience and what she's done and how she believes and what she thinks is so rich and wonderful that anybody in that region, I don't care if they're 18 or they're 90, could learn from her. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's just a richness of being able to communicate with someone like her who has lived a life. She didn't live a hard life like I, had to live. She was a little town girl and had indoor plumbing and had all of it. But oh my goodness.
And
There are so many fabulous people in our company. It's just incredible.
yeah. And what are some of the memorable growing pains or challenges that you faced in your Keller Williams career?
Well, where shall we start?
Wherever you want, Mo.
I'll give you one example. I was working with one of our Keller Williams owners on one of the coasts. And he misbehaved terribly. So as CEO, I had to deal with that. And it was very, 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 very hard because I didn't know if I would really have the support of people in Keller Williams, because when you deal with a really difficult issue, you can't always tell everybody what you're dealing with. It would be inappropriate and it would not be the honorable thing to do. So you sort of take a gamble when you deal with these very difficult issues. But he had put pornography on our server. And if anybody thinks I'm going to put up with that, they've got another thing coming. And I may not know about it, but in this case, I had a loan originator actually call me and tell me how awful he had been to her and what kind of emails he had sent her. And she was just beside herself. So somebody told her to call the CEO, who was me at the time. And so I dealt with that issue. And I want you to know that I did my homework. I documented everything that he had done and said in these emails. And during that time, I had actually resigned from being CEO, and Mark Willis had come aboard. And one day in my office, I saw the emails that our owner had sent to this loan originator, and I screamed. They were so terrible, and I'm not used to looking at pornography. And so Mark Willis comes running in my office and he said, "What's wrong, Mo? What's wrong?" And then he looks at my screen where he sees the pornography, and he's he was just stunned for a moment. So then I had a chance to tell him that the woman had called me and what all had happened. So Mark had me follow through with it, even though he was the new CEO. And so I had my assistant call the gentleman, and I said, "You be in Austin, Texas at such and such a time on a certain day." And so he came, and I didn't deal with him at first. Our technology people dealt with him, showed him the pornography that he had sent, and dealt with him in terms of the computer and the pornography. Then they bring him to me, and I am not friendly. You know, they call me the Velvet Hammer. I was in my Velvet Hammer mode. And I just told him that he had two choices. One, he could sue the company and sue me. Or two, I would give him 1 month to try and find an owner to buy his company. And by the way, he was one of the best financial owners we had in that area. And so I want you to know that he really backed down because he saw that I meant business, that we were going to get out of business with him. And because they had shown him the awful, awful things he had sent, it put me in a great position. I didn't have to show him. I just told him, you're gone. You can choose to go and sue me, or you can choose to go. The choice is yours. But by then, see, I knew he had seen enough of the stuff to know that he was dead meat, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that was brilliant, Mo, because you delegated part of it to someone who, that was their realm and their knowledge base, and then you could take care of the people side, which is absolutely your forte. So that was brilliant.
Gave him two choices, and of course the choice he took was to get out of the company within 30 days and give him an opportunity to sell it, which he did. He totally got out of the company. And see, we have so many people today who are afraid to stand up. They back down because they're scared. Well, I was scared too, but I wasn't about to back down. And so we got him out of the company. We got a new owner in that market center, and they have lived happily ever after. But the damage that he had created through his pornography emails that he'd sent, and I'm not going to let anybody use our server for that. I may not know about it for a while, but I'll eventually know, because I pray every night for the Lord to disclose anything that's going on in this company that's really bad that we need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And he always does.
Yep, I believe
that woman called me. I didn't even know she existed.
So another thing, we probably all want to really know, who is Gary Keller? Like, you probably know him as well as anyone. Can you share?
Oh, honey, I know him better than
something,
all
like,
of you
funny?
put together.
Can you share something, interesting and something funny that might give us some insight into the man?
Well, I've known him a long time now. What is it going on? I met him in 30 years ago, probably. I've kind of forgotten when I met him, but he is a visionary genius, is what he is. And he hates it when I call him that, and I call him that anyway. He doesn't like to be called a visionary genius, but that's what he is. And I love the way he works with his family. It's just when I was there when John was born, his son, John. And I got to rock John and hold John and burp him. And, and now he's all grown up and has kids of his own. But Gary is just brilliant. He's just brilliant. And I don't know if you all get these emails, but he'll put those little emojis, those little figures on his emails, and some of them I wonder, where in the world did he get them? And he'll write a one-liner, so he's got a real sense of humor. And he was just the greatest father to John. I can't tell you, and a great husband to marry, but I'm telling you, when he gets in the business world, he's a little tiger.
I can believe it.
He knows where he's going, he knows what he wants, and you better be with him or you're out. And I really, really, really love him. I'm old enough to be his mother. Let's see, I'm 83, he's 63. I'm 20 years older. And I just adore him. And I want to spank him sometimes, but I really, really love Gary Keller. In the bottom of my heart, I love him.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I get on him sometimes. I'm like the old mother.
Probably needs it sometimes.
Yeah, and but I love him so much, and I would do anything for him. So I'm in his court.
Well, and before we wrap up, did anybody have any other specific questions, or do we want to?
Kim, I see one here, and that is from Sally. Actually, Dave had one as well, but Mo talked a little bit about kind of the bottoms of the valleys and some of the challenges. One question Sally had was, what accomplishment is she most proud of during her time with KW?
You cannot imagine what a mess the company was in when Gary asked me to come and help him run the company. And it was in a mess because Gary was trying to do everything himself, and he'd reached a point where he couldn't do that any longer. It was affecting his health. I was worried to death about him because he was so tired and he was so exhausted. So I didn't know when he asked me to come and be the CEO that I was really walking into a mess. And he had around 40 offices at the time, and I closed a bunch of them. And I foreclosed on a bunch of regions, and I had to do a lot of really, really, really hard things to get the company in shape. But let me tell you what, he is a visionary genius, and he's a good man at heart, but he's tough. Now he's like a little lamb when he's with his grandchildren and grandchild, and he's with John and Mary and his family. He's just like a little puppy dog. But boy, he is a soldier. He is a warrior when it comes to building Keller Williams. And did I answer your question?
I think that is Sally's question, so I'll let her answer that if she's still here. But I think it was that the turnaround would be the accomplishment that is what I heard.
Yeah, it was exactly that. What are you most proud of while you've been working with Keller Williams?
Oh, I am so proud that I was able to take the company from, after I closed offices, from 30 offices to and then when I became CEO, we had 45 offices, and I backed it down to 30 offices. And then when I resigned because I was exhausted. And we had 530 offices, and we had 50,000 agents during my little 10-year period. I nearly worked myself to death, but I mean, that's why I now have a heart valve. That's why I have a pacemaker right here. I don't know if you can kind of see it, but there's my pacemaker. I paid a price for the period that I worked because we didn't have enough money back then to hire the people we needed, and I worked day and night. And I did that for years, and I paid a price. But I'm so glad I did. And now that I have a new heart, I have a new heart valve, I'm good for another 20 years. I tell you I am. So I know him really well. And sometimes, you know, I want to spank him, and sometimes I'm so proud of him, I just don't know what to do. I'm kind of like a mama to him.
Yeah, and I'm sure he appreciates it. Are there any other questions that we haven't touched on there, Matt?
No, I think we covered them all.
Okay,
Can
well,
can I say one thing?
Yes, Sally.
Mo, I'm Sally, and I'm actually in Cleveland, Tennessee, planning my daughter's wedding in April. And you are responsible for her meeting her fiance.
Really? How's
Yes, you
that?
are. She went to Lee University, and at the inspirational breakfast years ago, you had the Lee University singers
Yes.
there. And I had never heard of Lee until
Oh,
then. So when it came time for her to look for a college, I said, why don't you look at Lee? She wanted a Christian college that was pretty big and 5,000 students. She liked that size, and it has been the perfect fit. So she met her fiance because of you.
oh, isn't that exciting?
there you
Woo!
go,
I'm
Mo.
good for something.
Changing
right.
lives in ways you never expected, probably.
Exactly.
Well,
And I'll never forget in your book, A Joy-Filled Life, the one thing you said you learned from your parents, especially your mother. She said to you as a little girl going to school, if you ever get the opportunity to be part of an organization in which you can lead, take it. Be the first to volunteer. And I didn't read that until my youngest was going to college, and I actually told her that.
Oh, good.
And I just
Good.
thought that was such great advice for us to be telling our children, and wished I had known it earlier. Had thought of that earlier, or read your book earlier.
Well,
But thank you for that book.
it's pretty amazing because my parents lived such a difficult life. They were really smart people, but see, the recession hit, the Great Depression hit right after they were married. And my dad only had an 8th grade education because he had to support his family, but he was really smart. And my mother had a high school education. She was really, really smart. And she dreamed of going to college, but because of the recession back then, the depression, the Great Depression, and all of the problems they encountered, that never happened for her. And so it was wonderful for her to encourage me like that. And for my dad to stop me by the Carnegie Library, you know, and so I just appreciate them so much. Because nowadays, so many times when you find the kind of poverty I lived in, there's drugs connected with it. And the parents are all drugged out, and nobody's there to encourage the child or the children. I was the youngest of 5. So thank you for bringing that up.
well,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much, Mo. It has been a true joy to have you with us today. And I just want to kind of close with this. As I was preparing for this conversation today and trying to explain to friends and family who you are and what you mean to Keller Williams, I described you as being woven into the fabric of our company, and that we are the beneficiaries of a corporate culture that values us not just as money makers, but as human beings. And you have played a significant role in not just creating the culture, but in communicating the true value of that culture and making it a cornerstone of who we are. So from the bottom of my heart, and probably everyone in this Zoom room right now, thank you for being who you are and for giving us an avenue to create lives worth living. We appreciate you so much.
You're making me tear up. Oh my goodness, that was the sweetest thing anybody's ever said to me.
Oh, no.
So you're gonna
I would hope
cry.
you could.
Oh my, that
Mo,
is beautiful. That's just beautiful what you said.
Oh, thank you.
I
for
want you to
being with
write it down and send it to me.
we'll send you the recording, Mo. You can listen to it anytime you want. And Kim, I'm sure, thank you for doing this. Kim has been talking about, excited about the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
Well, anytime you
point.
want a conversation, feel free to set up a Zoom call, because I have some, regions and market centers that will do them several times a year. So we don't have to do it just once.
Well, we will take you up on that.
Okay.
Sure.